So it's Nikki.
Unafanya nini?
My
Umekula nini leo? Tumbo iko namna gani sasa? Poa.
Having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, guys, you're actually breaking up.
Them, so it might not be maybe very okay.
Now I can hear you, Eric.
We can always hear you when you talk about the fact that the connection's not working.
Yeah, actually, this is very strange because right now we can't hear you.
If there's any like useful content, then it breaks up.
Yeah.
We should. Hear us. Willa, can you guys hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I think we should be ready to proceed.
All right. Okay, so yeah, you said it is you, Eric, and I think the dev team, all of the dev team is with you right there, right?
Yes.
And Jonathan is just joined. I see him on the Hangout. Well, if you go to this page, it doesn't have much. Actually, we don't have that much this week, which means maybe we are actually doing very good, or we don't really pay attention to the call, or we don't really suggest topics which we're interested in. Anyway, so we have the review of the last week's to do, and then the second item is daily Scrum guide, Wheeler. Okay. Yeah, so if you look at the last week's call, there are several issues. We discussed about race tickets. We didn't go that much further, but I think we agreed that some of us will go through the tickets and see if there's anything we can help or something that can be useful for AMPATH, considering that we are doing the Angular and we are building the app against REST web services. I think I also reported this last week. I went through the tickets. I picked some of them. I'm working on one of those tickets right now, and it's a bit challenging because REST web services is a very specific module. It is a very specific design, which is good for extension. Yeah, but we have to learn how things work. So I did that. I don't know about the other guys on the call, so I guess you can give the updates on that.
No, I didn't look at any of the tickets.
Okay.
I didn't either. I did not.
Yeah, which tickets are this? Were people supposed to be looking at?
You remember a couple of weeks ago? Yeah, you sent an email that there is a talk about fixing the REST module.
I wasn't asking about that specific ticket. I was asking about, you were asking the others if they looked at a list of tickets. I was looking for the list of tickets. That
the list of tickets. Yeah, so I'm just starting to kind of starting the conversation or just trying to explain how this all started. So you sent an email about the REST and we discussed about it. I said, okay, I had an idea that we should look at the REST and the way things are. And Darius actually I gave a list of tickets that they have the status that should be done. And it's in, there is a link actually on that page, last week's page. If you click at that link, you'll see those tickets. Uh-oh.
Okay.
No, it's not working somehow. I think it's a wrong link. Okay, it's a wrong link. Anyway, but there are tickets on the OpenMRS Jura that are related to REST, and there are issues that needs to be fixed. So because we are currently working on this, we want to build the Angular app, and it is working against REST. The idea was to get involved in REST so that next time when you have an issue that requires to be fixed in order for us to proceed with our development, then it won't be such an issue. We could take it up ourselves. That was the idea. So, yeah. And I can actually get the link to those tickets again. I guess I did a mistake in creating that link there. It's not working. It's the wrong.
Can I?
I don't know what he's trying to say.
Yeah, actually, I can't hear him anymore.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can.
we can.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, still hear you now.
All right. So I was saying that although I think it is a great thing for us to support the REST Web Services module going into the future, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, we can. Yeah, very clear.
I'm a little bit wary right now of asking these guys to learn it simultaneously while trying to learn Angular. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the notion of fixing things, like if we need a feature, let's say we're writing an Angular tool and we need to be able to manipulate some resource and that feature doesn't exist or isn't working as expected, then making that change to the REST module at that time makes sense. But I don't know that, doing tickets that may not be immediately relevant to AMPATH in the REST module is necessarily a good use of time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so I think we're taking a step back here. So basically, I think the reason why we thought it is necessary, it's a good thing to do this, not necessary, I guess it's not necessary, it's a good thing, it's because down the line, if you remember, Jonathan, you've been facing issues with REST, and actually it might take a lot of time for you to get the solution or to get it fixed just because you have to wait for someone else to take a look at it and then fix it. So the idea was, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have all of us to go into like deep dive in REST and know how things work, but kind of being aware of what's going on with this module, because it's something that is very vital in what we're doing right now. I think it's a very good thing to do. Yeah, I can understand that the other guys, they haven't got time to go through the tickets and see if there's anything they can do. That's very understandable because they're dealing with Angular right now. And I think going forward, we can still say, okay, let's find some time and then just get an opportunity to see how things work and how can we maybe work on those tickets, or even if not working, see how we can use the efforts to.
Will,
I
agree with you. I agree with you completely. I just think that this very moment, I think it's a little bit much. And maybe one idea that I'm having as we're talking about this is that maybe one person, and that person it may be best for it to be you, but maybe in 2 or 3 weeks they can lead the team through kind of an overview of the REST module, rather than just having everybody kind of go into the code themselves and try to figure out what's going on, as an introduction to the REST Web Services module. And then over time, or not over time, but in the next few weeks or so, as we become more, we have a better understanding of the limitations that the REST module may have for us. Then we can start fixing the tickets that are relevant to us, as Burke was saying. Is anyone there? I don't hear anybody right now.
You are breaking up, actually. Now we can hear you.
I think you broke it up a little at the end, but I think we got your point.
Yeah.
So do we have?
Okay.
We had a list of things we wanted to make sure folks got up to speed with or were familiar with. Have we completed that?
Before we answer that question, I think, why don't we just, I mean, do we have a conclusion regarding this thing, the REST web services module? And
Yeah, I mean, I think what I heard from Jonathan was,
yeah,
if within a couple weeks you could kind of give a introduction, kind of walkthrough, like a,
yeah,
here's an example of how to, maybe it's taking on one of those tickets and then, but as you do it, kind of take some notes so that you can then walk through and say, hey, here's the ticket I was trying to solve, and then here, step by step, how I went about solving it. Especially if it's like adding a resource or something that would be likely to be what we would what we would need to do. That would be a good conversation to also record that people could refer back to.
okay, okay. Yeah, I think that's the best way to handle this right now. Ideal, actually, I think I might have been misunderstood. I wasn't actually thinking that every one of us should go and dive into the code. I just think the idea of being aware of, well, I guess, yeah, giving a session and explaining how you can do something in the module is really good, but just to kind of get the hang of something, especially as REST, because that's what we want to be doing right now. We'll be doing it. We'll be using it in the Angular app development. I was thinking it's kind of a good thing for every one of us to kind of be aware of how things work in there. But yeah, I guess giving the introduction or some kind of a session. Yeah.
We'll set the intro session with the plan that going forward, people will start taking ownership over a few issues that are related to REST for us, so that the session isn't just like, in one ear, out the other for people, but that we actually make use of the knowledge that's being provided.
JJ side.
Guys, are you still there?
We are still there, but I think we missed what JJ said.
Yeah, I missed that either. I missed it too. So.
Okay. Well, I think we've talked enough about talking about.
Yeah. That's true. But there's one thing though we haven't. I think it's very nice if we can hear from the guys themselves. I mean, Eric, Alfayo, Nikki, what do you guys think? Because it seems like making all these decisions without involving you, and I think it's not fair. So.
No, at the end of the day, we are interested in it, given that we are making calls to this module and using the REST. So at the end of the day, as we build, it will be naturally it will with the time we will, at the end of the day we'll have to learn about it, and once we find some, so far when here and there trying to build a concept is be done, find the obstacles, and as you get the obstacles, at the end of the day you'll have to go and look at the code and probably debug and see what is it that is causing this resource or this action to behave as it is. But generally, I will also support the idea that as we have during doing, maybe you don't have much, that you take time, the rest come. At the end of the day, understand it. But also having you also take a specific way of doing things, it would be good for you to do that so that we don't individually, maybe the four of us,
I think the connection is very.
a lot of time also trying to understand the same thing, but it depends with how don't have any idea of what is happening.
Mark, did you hear what he said? He was
Mila,
breaking
you
up
got
very badly. Mark, are you still there?
Yeah, I am. I couldn't hear what he said.
Yeah. Can you hear us, guys? Hello?
you hear?
I heard that one.
You heard the loud and clear, right?
Yeah, right now you are loud and clear.
So Alpha will just summarize what he said again.
Yeah, that would be
I
great.
said I will, as we go with time, we'll all get into. Personally, I'm also very on within the module, the rest module, and every other thing. But as at this, a few concepts that we are going to form submission, like what are some of the things that we want to have on our form. So we are just building the basic concepts. So once we build these concepts and we find they are working, then as we avail resources of, especially as we encounter the challenges that the JJ had experienced before, we will, at the end of that, during that period, probably it will be good for us to go through the code and find out what is it that is causing this and this problem here and there. But generally, I will also be interested in just having an overview of what they will ask. And as you say, it has a specific design process. Okay, it works in a specific, in certain way to take us through that, so that we don't waste each one of us, maybe the 4 resources, each trying to understand what you already understood, so that in time we can be on the same page, practicing those. I think when I speak, they don't. When you talk, they hear.
Willa, did we lose you?
I don't know why when Eric is talking, he's very clear, but when Alpha is talking, he's not as clear as Eric.
Eric, summarize what I said now.
Yeah, but anyway, I got most of it, so I think I understood. Yeah. So basically, I guess what Jonathan has said is okay, and is what we've decided. I'll keep on working on it, and when we get to the point where we need to go through the module, or we can actually schedule the time where we go through the module and explain the things I've been doing and my understanding, and if there's anything else we can do, then we'll take it from there. But for now, I think we can leave it at that. I think it's okay to leave it at that. Is JJ still on? I guess JJ is gone.
I think we lost him.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the next issue on the last week's to do, it's about updating the tickets regularly. So you guys, yeah. What's the status? This is for everybody. Updating it's not very measurable because it just says regular, which doesn't say what is regular. Every day, is it every week? But yeah, so you can update it accordingly and say what has been going on with the tickets, especially as far as updating is concerned.
I think for I know we are not doing as many tickets right now, but do that, especially the slowing of the form, HTML form. I think that is the only one that I took time to just to test it out and give my comments. We also worked on the math mapping.
Was it easy to fix?
Straightforward to fix it.
With the old errors themselves?
Yeah, you reprocess the errors once you're fixed.
Can you guys hear us?
Willa, can you hear us?
Actually, no. For me, I'm getting maybe just 30% of what you're saying.
I heard Jonathan.
Yeah, Will, just a follow-up question from the email I sent you. Have you been able to take a look at that, the remote form entry module and processing those forms?
I don't think. Okay, when did you send the email?
Yesterday.
Oh. I'm sorry. I think it's buried somewhere. I've checked the emails, but somehow I think I missed that one. I have to take a look at the email first.
So basically, I was talking to this. We're trying to switch to 3 or fiber. One thing that would make this transition easier, assuming that we haven't switched to sync by that point, is if the remote form entry module can allow forms to be processed locally and be visible by the team. Just because then the amount of syncing, well, we don't have to really send back data to them. So I know you were working on that module before. Have you had any, and we may have had it fall off your radar. Can you just give a quick update? Or was it somebody else that was working on it?
Basically, it does process. So it's only that they were to do more testing with the module, but the stage that we did, the module is on test server, that the processing, you can process it locally, and we added some parameter that you can also now pick that data that you have processed there and then send to any other server. So it can process, it can work. So, but we are also working on the sync. So at least the module is there, but maybe if we get some specifics of what we want, then we can just install some and then we have some people test.
The only thing that I don't know about sync is, does it work with InfoPath forms, or do they have to be HTML form entry forms?
It can work with that. We try to avoid that because yeah, solving it.
Until we have HTML, we have to keep using remote form entry. And once that's done, then we can move to the sync approach. Do you think that the sync
it will work even if we're using InfoPath?
I know, but it'll be a lot more megabytes.
Yeah.
That's what we want to avoid
right
now. So if we can use that as a temporary solution. So what you're saying to me is that it has to be tested.
Yeah, actually, the last time Victor was setting up the server, I wanted to test it. I tested on the test server with a few of the forms that I had. So basically, we would just have that server that you were setting up running and just test the rest of the forms. Should be able to work.
Okay. Burke, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Do you have? I'm assuming you could hear what Alfio was saying. Yeah.
I could hear parts of it.
Okay. Basically, we need a testing strategy for this updated remote form entry module to make sure that we don't lose data, essentially.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations on a testing strategy?
The updated remote form entry, is this the the version that installs locally as well as centrally?
Yeah, basically what we did was, remote form entry, when you choose to process, it doesn't it doesn't allow you to send any data to any other server. Once you process there, you process. So basically what we did is we added on some other parameter that can allow you to process, but also keep a copy that to a server somewhere else. So that you can, processing will just go normally, but then it will be keeping some the information, and then you can send what you want to.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of testing that, obviously if all the data gets processed and a copy isn't made, then it'll be obvious because there'll be nothing to bring to the server, but yeah, testing it in the field, there's no, because it depends on what people are entering, what forms they're entering. You could, I mean, I'm assuming that you've already kind of tested it against a test server just to verify that the behavior works the way you expect. Is that true?
Yeah, I tested it. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's behaving that way, then I think you roll it out to a site, the site that matters the most, and I don't know that there's no magical way to test it other than to beyond the behaviors working the way you expect, than to just monitor it closely as you're starting to use it. Make sure that the data that you expect to be coming is coming.
Mark and JJ, I think if I'm hearing Alfio correctly, basically what he did is just turning those. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah. So basically, it's turning those servers, the remote machines, into servers themselves. except that when you are using the remote form entry as a server, it doesn't. It just processes without keeping the copies because it assumes, okay, I'm getting all these files. I just need to process and then archive them. So basically, is that Alpha? Is that right? That's what you did, right?
Well, essentially,
So that again,
bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is, if that is what he did, and this process has been working all that time, it means I don't think we should worry much about it because it is the same thing, except that now, instead of just processing on those remote sites, you keep a copy and then you bring it back and process it again on the server.
I think that
Let me rephrase what I'm saying. Can we get this working in the field on production servers?
we can work. You know, the problem is I'm the only one who tested, so we just needed at least
No,
like
I
a
know,
minute.
I know.
Then we.
Let's get a plan. Let's get it rolled out. Let's get your good work in use. Okay.
so.
Yeah.
My understanding is that it's basically the same process. We're just copying from the queue that would go to central. We're copying that into the queue that also would process locally. So people when they do remote form entry will see those changes in their local server even before they have made the trip back to central and a new database has come out to them.
Well, I'm less worried about the additional functionality working. I mean, that's the bonus, but I just don't want to lose the data because that will be very problematic for us. Right? So we need to roll this out on a production server nearby, so it's easy to get to, like Masoriat or Turbo, or I don't know, somewhere nearby, and watch it carefully, and then make sure that it's working every day for some period of time. You guys can figure it out, but take it seriously, because if we lose the data, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Okay. So I think what we could do is for the server that they were preparing, we can just have that server somewhere. Then we just before we send it back. I think they must be having that server around. We use that server and then the test server, and then we try to see how the two performs.
Okay. I thought it sounded like you already think it works though.
Yeah, it works.
So let's put it on. Just review everything. All right. Put it on. Do one more test for these guys if they haven't seen it.
Okay.
All right. And put it, and let's talk with Miensha, and let's put it on one of the servers nearby that we can get to. Let's prove to ourselves that we're not going to lose data, and then we can start putting it on the further sites, which actually really need it, like Kitala. Okay.
JJ.
Yeah.
When you say lose data, what do you mean exactly? Lose as in, how do you envision this to happen?
I guess once the forms are processed and they move out of that remote form entry queue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how exactly can this happen? Because Alfayo, correct me if I'm wrong. I think what you did in that ticket, you're actually using the same process that have been proven to be working all this time, except that you are just running that process on the local instance, on those remote instances. Is that right?
That's right.
You didn't write any new code to do the processing, right?
I did not. Write any new.
Yeah, well, so
Willa, if I understand what happens with the remote form entry, I know that the form entry process usually stopped. So ideally, if processing is supposed to happen, then it means that you just need to activate that particular schedule. Is that right?
There's a form processor. People enter the form, and then it gets processed by a controller. And so that's the typical form entry process. Remote form entry just does that same thing, but instead of sending the files to the local controller, it queues them up, and they're taken and processed by the central server's controller. So all this fixes to do is to take a copy of the file and put it in the queue so it gets processed locally as well, like in addition to, which is, I think, the one key thing we want to be sure of is that the local processing is in addition to the central process continuing to function as it has been.
Okay. So just over the next week or two, we can actually make sure everything is working and get this on a real production server, prove that that's working, and then in the next month or two, get it on all of the servers. Okay. The sites will appreciate it because it means they can look up recent records instead of having to wait for synchronization to happen. Okay.
And the sites don't do any editing of data, correct?
Now,
Okay.
There's only one thing that is missing in that remote form entry, or not missing, it's not working correctly. And I think it's the error processing is not perfect, or is not behaving the way it should. That is something that needs to be fixed before we can decide to deploy this massively, because it can be a showstopper, and it has been in the past.
but isn't that just on the central server, Willa?
Yeah, it is on the central server, but okay. So you're saying if you just well, I think it is still something that we need to look at. We haven't yet found time. I was planning to have time with Alfire and see what we can do in order to just get rid of that problem, but we haven't done that. And I think it's important to.
I agree with you, but I don't think that that doesn't need to hold up putting this version up on the other sites. I mean, it would be nice to have everything fixed at once. So if we could do that, great. But I'm just asking that, you know, if I've put in some good work, let's make it real instead of just having it sit on our demo servers, okay?
Back something important on editing data. Do you vision that if there are issues to be fixed on data that have been identified from those particular remote sites, I guess that is supposed to be fixed?
Yeah, so the remote form entry process was supposed to be a temporary hack to last a few months until we could get sync working about 8 years ago. So it is an imperfect process, but it basically, the assumption is that the data are being entered at the remote site, get queued up, and come, and the processing is done centrally. That way, all edits of data must happen at the central server, because the other arm of that circle is that for the data to get back to the remote site, copies of the data of the database are taken to the remote site, and its database is updated. So if someone's entering data through the form entry process, it can get processed locally, you know, in addition to being sent to central. But if they make any local edits, those will be lost when the data come from central and overwrite the remote server. The other potential, so any local edits would be lost. The other potential problem would be if I think there's an assumption that when we bring data out from the central server to the remote server, we used to do the entire database. At some point, the whole database was too big, so we tried to limit it, like observations and encounters, to just those that mattered to the remote site where the patient had ever been seen at that site. I think the one other potential complication we could run into by processing locally is if there's any references in the database as data get processed locally that then, you know, cause problems or conflicts when we try to overwrite those with data from central. I don't think that would be a problem, because I believe we just overwrite those tables, but we need to be careful of that. If there were any references, for example, I think we just lost Willa.
No, I'm here.
Okay. I see Bonnie. I don't see the team. Did we lose the team?
Oh, I think, yeah, they're gone. There's just Bonnie. Me and you. Me and you and Bonnie.
Yeah. So I'll stop talking then.
No, you can talk. I'm listening.
Well, I mean, the thing I worry about is if there were any references, for example, if you made a patient, locally, or you make an encounter or something like that, or an observation locally, and then if there's any reference to those data outside of those tables that isn't getting updated. Let's say it was. I'm just thinking of a random example. Let's say you were running reporting tools on the remote server, and if the reporting process made any references to patient data or encounter data, when a new SQL dump comes from Central and overwrites that, all those references.
Burke, we're back.
Hey, so the point I was trying to make is there's obviously, since data is supposed to be coming from Central back out to the remote sites and overwriting data, that's why you don't want to edit at the remote site. But the other concern, what I was when you guys dropped off, I was trying to get out was that if there are any references to those data, to patient data, like patients, encounters, observations, outside of the tables that are getting updated, then we could run into some problems. So for example, if you process, this is just a random example, but imagine you were processing data locally now, and some observations were created, and through some, a reporting module or some other thing that is just being done locally, you made any kind of references to those data, the local data, now with local, internal identifiers that were created on the local server, and new data comes and tries to override all that from Central, then those references will become invalid because the internal identifiers are going to change.
We actually, right now the local servers don't get used for anything except clinical summaries. But one question that we were just discussing that I wonder if you know the answer to is, let's say you create the patient, you create the form goes to Central. I'm guessing that Central recognizes somehow that it's a new patient and then creates the new patient and submits the form. Is that right?
Sorry, I missed part of that. If you do a form that creates a new patient, anytime we submit forms, part of the remote form entry process, part of setting that up was to ensure that all demographic data about a patient, so not just name and identifier, but everything we know about that patient is included in every form. So if a patient doesn't exist on Central, when a form is received from a remote site, it will create the patient.
How does it figure out that the patient is new?
I think it looks at the patient identifier.
Yeah, not the internal patient.
It is that in fact, yeah.
No, it can't. I don't think it can. It can't depend on local identifier because the internal identifier is created on the remote site when the patient's registered at the remote site. So it's meaningless to the Central server.
Okay. Okay, so we're good. So that means my worry is that the patient got created on the remote site. You enter a second form. The second form goes to Central, and then it creates a new patient for that second form, even though it already existed on the first form because it was using an internal identifier.
Yeah, well, there shouldn't be a reliance on internal identifiers from the remote server. Well, I don't know in terms of like form IDs and things like that. There might be assumption that metadata is the same. But
we'll look into it.
we need to verify that what gets updated, both technically what gets updated when the data comes from the central server to the remote server, because that has changed over time. We need to make sure we know what's getting updated, and then we also need to understand from a process standpoint that whether that is still happening. Are they still taking the data from central and taking it out to remote servers, or is that broken? Because if those data are
it happens not as often as it used to, and they're not using the remote form entry module to import data. They're just sourcing the tables that Mientia created the MySQL dump from.
okay. Well, as long as that, as long as that includes all the, the patient table, the encounter obs, all the tables that patient data might refer to or be referred from, then I think we should be good.
Okay. Well, we'll think about this. We can see another problem.
I mean, you could just imagine if there was anything, say it was something in the summary process, anything that referred to internally to specific rows in the remote server is liable to break.
Mark?
Yeah.
A good example would be like a patient attribute, or that is being created on the remote server. When you bring this patient to the central server, it gets another internal ID. When you overwrite, that attribute is no longer referring to the same patient.
Yeah. Well, you mean the person attributes?
Yeah.
Yeah. But hopefully hopefully those get.
They'll be created together with the in that case then but if it is created later when that patient is already been created, then you don't have that information.
All right, look, let's not figure this out right now. Basically, somebody, I'll talk to the team here, is going to design a flow of this and figure out all the testing points and then conduct tests for all of those points. And if if it's breaking somewhere because of some sort of internal ID error, then we'll have to rethink whether this is actually a viable model. Okay?
Yeah. The assumption from the beginning with that module was that data would get entered at the remote site. The patient would get registered at the remote site, and that actually puts a new patient into the database. The form would be entered and then sit in a queue, be processed centrally, and then all the entire database would be rewritten from central each time data came out. And that was the initial assumption. We evolved to a point where we stopped sending the entire database and started trying to filter it. But given those assumptions, now if we start processing data locally, we just need to be careful that we're not creating foreign key relationships and depending on things being there that aren't getting overwritten when data comes from central.
Okay.
Yeah, but I just have a quick question. I'm sure the reason why sync came up is because some of these particular issues might have been seen within remote form entry, and maybe that is why sync decided to rely more on UUID. Is there a reason why maybe we cannot really support sync, or maybe do a lot of efforts in sync than doing a lot of efforts in remote form entry?
Historically, it's just because we have not been able to get sync working. I think part of
the issue for us now is that we have so many forms. To convert them all to HTML
because it's not really that it's restricted to InfoPath, because simply it sends a payload. Yeah, a payload simply.
We actually tried to get sync running, and it was because we could not get sync running without errors that we used remote form entry as a workaround. And here we are, 9 years later.
Yeah. The hope was that this would be a quick fix to get remote form entry to work if we just process the forms. But if it's going to create these problems, then if you can get sync working, then that's fine. So we only have a few minutes left on the call, but let's rethink this issue, and we'll follow up over email about this. Okay?
Yeah, Jonathan, just a quick question.
Yeah.
What is the reason we need to reconsider remote form entry if it seems like sync is something that can be configured and work?
Sync is not going to get configured in a week. Remote form entry with this little patch could be installed tomorrow.
Okay, that's the reason. Is that the case?
It's not instead of working on sync.
Yeah, I understand that, but what I'm trying to get at is, so we might be spending a lot of effort on two things at the same time, while you can just say, okay, you know what, let's concentrate on this, because this it has been proved that it can work and it can be configured. So if we feel like, okay, let's put all our effort in sync, make sure it works.
We agree. The idea was just that Alfio had worked on this, had a working example. If it actually can sustain these problems that we've just been raising, then let's just get it going. And if Eric can get sync going in the next few months, then all the better. Okay.
Okay.
So tomorrow, I think on the technical call, I'll be doing a demo of the configurations we did. I think we can take that time also to review some of the issues we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, one last thing, JJ.
Yes.
I think maybe if we think about the remote form entries, sometimes maybe we are complicating things that much. I think we need to consider about the use cases that we have in those remote sites. Maybe we won't have those problems we think we'll have if those things happen, but maybe those things will never happen. People will not try to add new things in the patients or anything like that. We might not have those issues at all. So maybe we need also to focus on those use cases. Am I making any sense?
Right.
Yeah, we agree with you.
Yeah.
I think at some point we decided that, okay, we can use the remote form entry that way with that fix, and we'll like lock any. We don't want people to edit anything on those sites. And if you do the updates from the center frequently, then if we just manage to make it as frequent as possible or as necessary, then we might avoid all these other issues that comes in between. And these issues, they will actually happen if you don't update the server regularly. If you take 1 month, you take 2 months, then yeah, maybe you'll be facing these problems.
Yeah, but I think the part of the problem with remote form entry is that the data from central to the remote site are not deltas. They need to be all the data because trying to, So I think remote form entry was never meant to be a long-term solution. Sync, if we can get it working, is a better option. It's just, now we have Eric, we have a better chance than ever to get sync working. But we don't have to like choose one or the other. We definitely don't want to run remote form entry on a server that we're running sync on. That's for sure. But we can run remote form entry until we have sync working.
Yeah, guys, I gotta end this call because we're using my phone right now, and I have to be on a call at 5.
Okay.
All right.
But we'll see you tomorrow at the technical call. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Tuto nana.
But say that again.
Tuto nana.
Nice. Okay. All right. I think bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. JJ, I thought we were going to end this call, and that's why I said bye-bye.